Thank you for visiting the Africa Rising Cycling Podcast, where we share the big and most interesting cycling stories from across the continent of Africa and from around the world where African cyclists are racing and riding.
Hello there. On the Africa Rising Cycling Podcast today, we're joined by two very important actors in the world of cycling, and with whom we've worked for many years. Jacques and Jean-Pierre Van Zyl, JP as he's known, from the UCI World Cycling Sector. Jacques is based in Aigle in Switzerland and JP in Paarl in South Africa. Welcome to the podcast to you both.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Nice, guys. Jacques, let's start with you. You've been with the UCI World Cycling Centre for almost 4 years now. Can you give our listeners a good understanding of your role and the role of the UCI World Cycling Centre in the cycling ecosystem?
Great, Jeremy. How much time do you have? I guess you can kind of break this into two different categories in terms of the World Cycling Centre and what my role is. One is on the basically on the regional side of the equation, whereby the whole UCI World Cycling Centre is also the home to the International Cycling Federation, the UCI, and so I oversee the management of the facility. That means it's velodrome, it's BMX racing track, and BMX freestyle, and the building itself. So there's that, and we have a restaurant as well, which is open to the public. So that's on the regional, if you will. That's the regional side of the equation. The bigger piece, I guess, has to do with cycling development as a whole. So obviously, we're driven by the 2030 agenda, which is the globalization of the sport of cycling. And so we basically use some strategies and mechanisms to actually help grow the sport of cycling everywhere on the world, obviously including Africa, through different mechanisms that we might have. One is through the 11 satellites that we have strewn across the globe, 2 of which are in Africa. And the other mechanisms are basically the initiatives that we put in play in terms of education, coach education, mechanic education. We contribute and work very much hand in glove with the sport department of the UCI in terms of commissaire education, director sportif education, and also event safety manager as well. So all these things kind of contribute in a way to the development of cycling and that ecosystem, because we know there's if we work around events that are existing and JP will speak to that, I'm sure. We try and build around existing events opportunities to develop and educate coaches, mechanics, athletes, et cetera, because at the end of the day, if we educate them, they can go back home if they're working here at the World Cycling Centre. If they're coming here for training or development, then the hope is that they can actually teach what they learn. They've learned at the WCC in the countries and back in their countries as well. So that's, in a nutshell, that's kind of what my role is to deploy these initiatives across the globe.
Perfect, thank you. And obviously, you guys work very closely with Scott, so it's nice to see Biniam Girmay on a Scott bike in a yellow jersey today, right?
Definitely a good point. Biniam in the yellow is really good. We're having a Scott bike is definitely awesome, and I guess it brings it back to his roots of being at the World Cycling Centre himself.
Absolutely, and that's a good way to turn to JP. Jacques described the overall role of World Cycling Centre, but you've been in this a little bit longer. Can you explain your history in African cycling and your role in cycling development, and maybe a little bit about the centre in Paarl as well, like what folks will find when they visit?
Okay, so thanks, Jeremy. Yes, I started in 2005 after I finished my career as a 6-day professional rider, and got straight into it. Went to Australia to join Ron Bonham at the AIS and get my certification through Australian Cycling. And in the first 5-6 years, I was coaching the African athletes, and I was boots on the ground. Also developing the National Federation structure through Africa Tour and trying to get more races on the calendar. We started with 16 national federations back then. Now we have 54. So talking about Paarl, what you'll find in Paarl is a cycling orientated community. I think the schools cycling is probably some of the biggest in the world, just for a city. You have mountain bike trails, you have outdoor velodrome, you have mountain passes, you have certainly in Africa, I think the motorists are so friendly to cycling. They see us every morning, they see us riding, kids ride their bikes to school. So what you'll find facility-wise is a lot of mountain bike XCO trails in and around Paarl and also in Stellenbosch. We have the velodrome, we have the indoor velodrome in Cape Town. And then, of course, we have a lot of races. The world famous cycle tour, that's in March, where we'll have a training camp and we'll have our athletes competing. It's run by Galazzo now. So, yes, lots of things to see.
Yeah, and people forget, we talk about road cycling all the time, but you forget that mountain biking is such a big thing down there with, the Cape Epic, the Tour de France off-road, as they call it.
Absolutely. It's a festival of cycling down there, especially in and around the mountains.
And it's something actually we'll probably talk about on another podcast, but there's a lot of studies that show that a good development in mountain biking when you're young really does give you a good basis to be a road cyclist. So that's a great thing that you guys are doing by having the mountain biking taking place as well, right? You've had Chris Froome and Adel Evans and guys like this come through from mountain bike background.
Exactly. And Alan Heatherley is, I think, they currently at the Road National Championships, and he finished third in the time trial. I was quite surprised. I didn't think that he would be up there with Stefan de Bot, who was also one of my boys in the World Cycling Center in Africa, winning the elite time trial. But it's great to see all of them come through, and yeah, definitely gives you a skill set. And that's what's needed in Africa, is basic skills.
I think you're going to see a very, very competitive road races this weekend in South Africa for men and women. Every bit of social media seems to be teams everywhere popping up. So it's great to see the Shanolo guys launch this year as well, right? A South African continental team, first time in several years. So it looks good, right?
Yeah, no, it looks good. And I think they're also focusing on women's cycling with the women's team in the pipeline for next year, I think, for the Conti team. So, and that's what we need in Africa, I think, and maybe we'll elaborate later a little bit more about what's necessary and where we need to go in Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. But obviously we're still in African cycling. I mean, we're still buzzing from having a world championships on African soil in the last few months. I mean, Jacques, we'll go back to, what was it, September 2021, I think, when the announcement took place. Which is a huge moment, I think, for everyone involved in African cycling. We can track back where that came from a little bit later. Thinking back to last year with the Worlds, thinking through the whole year, because you had the Africa 2025 program, things like that. Like, how big a thing was it for you? I mean, it must have taken over your whole life.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lead up to the actual World Championships last year, which was basically, and JP and I had started this program on the back end. I mean, this whole initiative, the Africa 2025 initiative, I must say, was basically, I guess, to a certain degree, the brainchild of both JP and de Vincent Jacques, who passed away in March of 2022. So really, what we did is basically just kind of put those wheels in motion in terms of bringing that program, the Africa 2025 program, on its feet, putting on the road, and so that really started, I would say in end of 2022, and the goal there was actually to prepare in the best way possible the athletes, African athletes, male and female, to perform at the World Championships in September of last. And so that started. There was some training camps in Paarl at the WCCA with JP and his staff. We had some training camps also in Rwanda itself as well, at the satellite. Satellite was inaugurated last year in Yamata, Bugesera, and Rwamagana and Musanze. And so we had some training camps there, and then obviously a lot of all the athletes would come to France and Brittany to actually do some training. And actually, the idea was really to immerse them in kind of a higher level competition, so they can be adapt as well as possible for when they actually hit the Rwandan roads in September of last. And I think we we had a lot of good athletes. We had some athletes that came out of the program because the fit just wasn't right. Sometimes we have to, when you identify athletes, and JP is definitely an expert in this, but when you identify athletes, going to Continental Championships, different races, you see how they are in the races. But obviously when you put them in a training camp environment, different environments, especially out of their normal environment, their normal support structure, and you bring them into, let's say, into France, sometimes it just doesn't fit. We have to look at the tactical, technical, physiological, and psychological profiles, but also it has look at it as a whole and look if they're mentally ready and mature enough to actually take the step over to Europe. And unfortunately, sometimes they're just not ready, and you don't know until they actually land in France or in Europe or whatever, and go through the paces for a few weeks, and then you're like, oh, okay, we'll try and work with you, but it might be that you're not quite ready for it. So we've had a bit of turnover with these athletes, but I mean that's it's normal as far as I'm concerned. Having done training camps before, there's a bit of turnover, and obviously the goal was to actually prepare them as well as possible. And we saw with Tsige finishing 7th at the Worlds this year in the junior category, which was really an athlete who was detected by JP and his team early on 2 years ago, and then basically brought on to the Africa 2025 program. And we know where she what she's done since, and where she's landed, which we're really happy for that. And I mean, these athletes, even though they might sign with different big teams and stuff, we still keep track of them. We're still there to help them out. We're launching what we call the Global 2028 program for the next 3 years. But using what we learned from the Africa 2025 program, I understand more the psyche of African cycling. By all means, I'm not an expert, but I really see the potential in African cycling, and I'm really passionate about kind of potentiating that potential along in partnership with JP, obviously, and we work really well hand in glove on that front. And we want to see African athletes succeed, and that's the name of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's nothing like going shoulder to shoulder in a French peloton, JP. Right? That's what they need to experience, is that 130, 140 person peloton.
I get the hair in the back of my neck was just rising when he said that, and I think just thinking about seeing Biniam arriving, fighting for victory, and see where they come from, seeing people like Tsige Girmay that started and went to the Tour de France and now is running a team as well. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure, and it's a blessing for me. I mean, I've lived a really amazing life in African cycling, after my career.
If we think back, it's probably 20 years actually. When what was then Team Rwanda, but is now Africa Rising, first came into play in Rwanda, the original founders met Adrien Niyonshuti in a wooden bike race in rural Rwanda. I think he was introduced to you. Doug Ryder got involved. He got a contract with MTN Quebecer and then Dimension Data. And then we have a World Championships in Rwanda in 2025. It's been a long journey for you. You've been in all of that. How did hearing the announcement back in 2021 feel to you? Like, what was that moment?
I think it's that moment of full circle where you go back to Adrien, and I think how he was living in my house, eating on weekends with me, how I drove him to the races, how I took him to the Cape Epic, how I convinced Doug Ryder to take the Africans and build an African team. And you'll laugh when you hear this. And it was basically a partnership between Jacques and Africa Rising and Doug and myself, saying, well, you create the opportunities, I'll get the talented athletes for you, and you go all the way. You know how to sell ice to Eskimos, I know how to find the talent. And then you get to 2021, and we're going to have a World Championships on African soil. And the first 10 years, from 2005 to 2000, actually less than 10, 2013, I was the Africa Tour delegate, I could say, consultant, and I established Africa Championships during those years. And wow, what a journey, from where it was and where it is today, with a professional organizer organizing the championships. And luckily Laurent Bezo came from ASO back then, and then joined the UCI and took it to another level. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, Jacques, but he's back. He's back to Africa. So I'm very happy, very positive about the future. But to go back to Rwanda 2021, I think all of us that started in 2006-07 with Team Africa Rising, or Team Rwanda back then, you just have that quiet moment where you sit down and you don't have to say anything. You just enjoy the moment.
It's fascinating you say that, because there was a moment, I think, at the World Championships. I was with Enoch, Biniam, Doug, and a couple of the Eritreans, and I think Doug looked at me and went, "I'm off duty here." And he just said, "I haven't been in Africa like this for many years." And he talked about you and the past and other folk, like Carol's name came up and many of these folk. And he's just like, "It's pretty cool, isn't it? We're here in the heart of Africa at a World Championships."
Absolutely. There's so many people that had part and parcel of this success, from Pat McQuaid back then, David Lapatian taking that bold step to actually give an African championships, and having the vision to believe in us and say, hey, they can do it, So, to all of them, I salute you. Thank you for believing in us, because I do believe, and I might be biased, that was the best World Championships I've ever been to.
Absolutely. But I think sport is all about results, right? And, you guys are developing athletes. And I think, if I can say this, the two best performing African riders were in the junior races, right? So Tsige Kahsay Kiros from Ethiopia in the women, and then Nahom Ephraim in the men, both around the top 10. She's gone off to Canyon Shram's on the crypto generation. Nahom's signed with Bike Aid. So that's what it's all about, right?
I have to say that it's been because of specific projects, development projects, a lot of people coming together, and a huge gratefulness to UCI and World Cycling Center for the financial support they've given, to African cycling, and through me at the World Cycling Center, creating that stability that was needed to actually grow African cycling. And I think ultimately that was the secret. It created a stable platform, and with a lot of hard work and a lot of people that names will not be mentioned here today, that made African cycling boom.
I think for Africa, we need to continue to push, and we can't keep the pressure off, I think, in Africa. I think the success of these 110 athletes are now pro are collective. It's coming from a collective effort. We're not the only cog in the on the bike, in terms of, say, we're 11 cog, but we still need a 16, we still need an 18, which is Africa Rising. We still need different initiatives that are happening all across the continent to continue to uplift African cycling. The other area we're continuing to focus, and I mentioned it before with our women's team, when you look at the 10 athletes from our women's team, 5 of them are African. Right. So we continue to want to push African content. And if we can actually find a bit more funding for next year and the following years, we want to be able to actually bring back the men's program on the road.
If you are to get that men's team going, that's where some of the other nations will get that chance, rather than, as you say, trying to get themselves into a world tour setup or a development team without having experienced Europe. So it's going to be a vital part of the pathway there.
But we want to be able to expand a bit more with other national federations. We're doing a lot of work with Benin, for instance, with Romuald, who's doing a fantastic job on his end. But there's also other countries that we want to be able to actually assist in developing. But at the same time, we have to be strategic as well, where we have to be able to start looking at working with national federations that want to progress. It's awesome. We got 54 national federations in Africa. It's great. But we know there's right now, unfortunately, there's still only a handful of national federations that actually are fairly equipped to actually want to progress and can progress. Our job is to first, and it sounds bad to say that, but our job is to first work with those national federations that are equipped, have the knowledge and know-how to to work and want to grow the sport, start with them, and then hopefully that'll bring a bit of a momentum and of an approach of other national federations who want to follow in those footsteps. And it's not because we want to isolate those national federations. We want everybody there, but at the same time, if we want to be have the best return on investment, and the return on investment is basically more cyclists, more road athletes or more mountain bikers from Africa on the whole, then we have to focus on the national federations that are actually, let's say, riding in the same direction as we are right now. And that's really the dream, right? That's what we're all aiming for, is so we have universality, if you will, African universality, and that's what we want to be aiming for. But to get there, we have to start with the ones that actually are willing to actually, put in the hard miles.
I look at the data. I mean, 54 federations is a great number, right? Then 2025, I think only 18 of those 54 had national championships. Like, what more do you think we can do, JP, to get them organized? Because obviously those UCI points at national champs are the lifeblood for these federations.
I think it's vital. You're right. The UCI points at the national championships, but just to add on what Jacques was saying, we have those handful of national federations that are really engaged and have a structure. But we have a vision and a plan that we will implement with Jacques through the World Cycling Center and through the Confederation Solidarity Development Program, which is called the Radar Program. And it's regional African development races that we recognize. So we bring the education, literally all of the education, to a race, let's call it Benin. And everyone in that region bring their youth athletes, come to a training camp. We do a talent ID, we do skills training, but we have a mechanics course, we have a coaching course, we have a commissaires course. And we have the local regional race organizers to actually see how a good race is organized at the Tour of Benin. And that's the vision that we have, to actually educate federations and explain to them why they have to have a club structure, a regional structure, a regional calendar, a national calendar, and why you have to have the national championships.
It's funny, I had a discussion with the organizer of the Tour of Rwanda last year, and they were telling me they want to go up to World Tour level. And I said, well, that's great, but then the only national, I mean, I think there were 6 or 5 national teams in that race last year. And obviously with UCI rules, that means there'd only be the host nation. So I was like, well, actually, why don't you guys take your 2.1 knowledge and go and help the 6 2.2 races across Africa become 2.1s, because everyone wins.
And that's I think that's, as we mentioned, racing in general is the lifeblood of the sport. Being able to compete, that's the lifeblood of the sport. And JP mentioned Laurent Bezeau coming back. He's got a new role, not only focusing in Africa, but aligning and getting the calendars in line in all continents. So obviously he's got, the idea is, because there's less than 10 big races in Africa, and it's to build that calendar. And so he's got his work cut out for him. But I think as well that if we don't have races, we don't exist. And so if we don't have races, we don't have we don't have any motivation to develop athletes. There's no motivation to actually develop coaches and mechanics and commissaires and safety managers, technical delegates, et cetera, et cetera. The races are the lifeblood. So there's a massive need to actually increase the number of races on the continent.
Yeah, I mean, JP, we put out a piece the other day with the whole calendar for 2026 of all UCI races, and it's a real surprise. I mean, you have Tour of Algeria looking right up against Tour of Benin. I think you've got Tour of Cameroon and Tour of Mauritius on at the same time. So we have 6 races in the calendar year, and 4 of them are basically conflicting.
I think that's a hard one to tackle, because some of them are around specific dates where they could get funding for specific races, which makes it difficult. But I think what we should address rather is to say we only have 8 or 10 races in Africa, and that we should absolutely work hard to get more international events. My look at things after 20 years is, when we had 40 UCI races back in the day in 2009, 2010, we could choose and pick wherever we wanted to go. Tour of Gabon, just to mention one of them. In South Africa, we had the Tour of South Africa. We had 5 1.1 races. We had so many races that we could choose from, and the opportunities were there for African athletes actually to show their talent. Now we have only 8 opportunities to show your talent, plus the Africa Championships at a high level, and Tour de Rwanda being the highest. The other thing is African visas. We don't get visas to go to Europe for more than 90 days. And then you need to have a club team, or you have to have someone that will host you. So to get access to a higher level is very difficult. And the quickest way for us to actually race at a European level is to bring the Europeans to African soil and organize more races. So for me, a key focus would be to have more races. The more races we have in Africa, the club teams from Belgium, from France, from Germany, they will come from Switzerland. And that's what we need. That's the core development for me, to see African men's athletes and women's athletes to actually make the gap that we need to bridge to international level sooner. And with World Cycling Center Continental Team, I mean, that's Jacques' baby that I think really has a huge impact. And what he said before is we need to have a men's structure for the road in Europe through the WCC. And we all agree that's necessary, but we need more races in Africa.
We're just going to turn slightly to something a little bit more personal. I mean, JP always tells me he doesn't like the limelight, so I'm going to put you in the limelight because it's important for us to stretch our boundaries. You've worked with so many riders. I think unofficially, if I look at pretty much every African rider that's now or has been World Tour, Pro Conti and Conti, I think something like 95% or more have been through the World Cycling Center, whether it's through Paarl or whether it's through Aigle as well. So you have been behind a lot of these riders, but who are the riders, and whether it's success in the sport or just as human beings, who are the riders that have really stood out to you?
Special athletes, there's many good ones. Adrien Niyonshuti, Tsige Kahsay Kiros, Daniel Tekle-Monat, Marawi Kudus, Biniam. I mean, and that's probably because I've kept mentoring a lot of these athletes. So it's a biased thing to say, but even Kim Lecourt. I mean, I've known Kim since she started racing in South Africa quite a lot, and coming to a training camp, and yeah, they're all great riders. They all have good characters.
I'm glad you mentioned Kim. I mean, what a moment last year to see. I think she now is the record holder for an African wearing the yellow jersey of Tour de France, right? 3 days. We had Daryl Impey back in 2013, so it's been a while since it happened. But it's fascinating. I mean, in that 110 we mentioned earlier, nearly 20 of those riders currently are women as well. I'd say African women's cycling has seen a huge growth in the last few years. We had Ashley Moulman-Pasio for a long time as pretty much the only rider out there, and she's in her final year this year. But Kim, I think, set a new bar, and so to see Biniam and Kim, what a moment for African cycling to have 2 ambassadors now at the top of the sport. Like, what do you think to that?
Well, I think we do need ambassadors, and we do need successful role models, because it shows you what is possible coming from a small island in Mauritius and coming from Eritrea, probably one of the highest earning athletes in the peloton and most successful 3 stage wins in one Tour de France. It is possible, dream big, dream bigger than what you believe, because I believe everything is possible. If you see what's happening in track and field, I believe Africa's got a spot in cycling.
Thank you guys for your time today. It's been a fascinating discussion. We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Africa Rising Cycling Podcast. Please do keep an eye on all our Africa Rising Cycling social media channels for more news and stories, and we look forward to welcoming you back for another episode very soon.